Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Priscilla. I'm a journalist and PR consultant, and I am delighted to be joined today by Tori Murphy and Cath Kidston, doyens of their field, connoisseurs of the best kind in art, textiles, print, homewares, and so on. We're here really today to talk about the collaboration that exists between the both of them, called The Joy of Print. They've worked together on it, still on sale. They're going to be talking about it in a moment. But I thought, just in case some people are a little unsure as to where these two fantastic women have come from in their careers, I thought maybe we might start with a little bit of an introduction as to how you've got to this stage and what you've seen on your way here. So, Tori, would you like to start?
Well, good afternoon. It's taken a long time to get here. It's certainly not a quick journey. I'll keep it brief, but started at art school, started in fine arts, quickly realised that that might not be my path, and I left and I worked in the fashion industry. 4 years of sort of gaining enormous experience, then I went back. And all of that experience fed into then a master's in textiles. But it wasn't until I left and I worked in Italy, and I found myself on the factory floor in Italy, not sort of face down, but working, that the sort of penny dropped for me, and that's where I realised my passion was. It was in textile manufacturing and not necessarily just design. And so I came back to the UK with the idea of, can I do what I saw in Italy, but in England? And it was November 2011. I didn't have any factories or mills or machinists or samples or designs, but I booked to stand here for the following year and then spent 6 months literally traveling around the country trying to find people who could help me. Everybody thought I was mad. My friends were getting married. Everyone was having children, and I was off on my own. Nobody understood what I was doing when I said I want to launch an English homeware brand where everything is made in England. But thankfully, 10 years later, we're here. So, 10 years of little progress, often, and that's how we're here now.
And Cath?
Hello, it's very nice to be here because when I started my business that I had for 20 odd years, I began by coming to Top Drawer and selling products here. So it's a really nice kind of circle to be here and be going around the stands and remembering all of that. I started out with an interiors background. Well, actually, to be fair, I worked in shops for a long time. Most of my 20s, I was a shop girl. And then I love everything about shops and retailing. Then I worked in interiors, and from that, I began my Cath Kidston brand with a little shop in West London in 1992. And that took a while to grow. I had interiors on the side, the business going on to fund what I did. And it ended up, the journey I took with that business was so surprising and not how I imagined from starting out with this little business. But it grew to being over 250 stores by the time I left in 2015. And a lot of those were in Asia. It was a bigger business in Asia than in the UK. So I had this really extraordinary, very exciting journey with that. And it came to a time in 2015 where I thought I've peaked, I've got to where I can, and the business has its own legs, and I left. And I thought I'd do all the things I imagined. I worked all my life. I thought I'd go to museums, travel, do my garden, have this amazing non-working life that I had never had. And I remember the first year seeing a lot of sky. You know, when you're in the office or working all day, you don't see sky unless you're working outdoors. But after about a year, it really dawned on me the reason I love going to museums, doing all this stuff, is to get ideas for work, for creative work. And I love print. Print is in my DNA, and it always will be. Print and pattern and retail, and generally retail. So I began a small print studio again called Joy Print in 2018, I think it began. And from there, I've been doing collaborations, designing a small collection for ourselves, working a lot with the Japanese company Uniqlo, who I have worked with in the past, and I love their aesthetic and Japanese attention to detail and nuance and storytelling. So that's the backbone of how I run the studio. But I also like collaborating with other brands. So I started out working with a lovely small company, someone called Rosie de Roog, who makes beautiful handmade lampshades. And she used some of our prints for her lampshades. And the notion of what I'm doing now is I think my experience is really retail and print, but there's the joy of collaborating with other brands and learning about what they do and being sort of involved in other people's knowledge, learning from other people's knowledge is absolutely my top of my list. So Tori, I think I'd posted a very simple block print on Instagram. And it was a tiny, very, very nothing little print of an old archive saying, it's about how simple things are sometimes the best, but are very difficult to do. And Tori approached me with her lovely weave business, and I'd been following her and everything. And it's so interesting to work with someone who understands this different kind of aspect of using pattern. Has all the values that I share of working in England, manufacturing in the UK. Her business is totally personal. It's her sort of relationship with the people she works with, everything felt really comfortable. I really loved the setup that you had. So we began to work together last year, building this collaboration of...
Can you tell us a little bit about what's in the collaboration, just in case anyone hasn't seen it?
So Tori, you describe what we did together.
So we came together initially because sort of the pattern drew us together, fabric, but we decided that the best place to sort of go with it was a kitchen textile collaboration. So we're using English woven cotton and linen, which we've then manufactured in England into a collection of kitchen textiles. So textiles, tea towels, oven gloves, tablecloths, sort of a tabletop collection.
And what would you say what are your top sort of 2 or 3 things about collaborating with someone and not only going it alone with something? So what are the advantages of having 2 minds instead of 1?
Gosh, for many years now, I've worked with numerous collaborations along the way. I think it started out, Debenhams started a thing called Designer at Debenhams. I don't know if there's anyone here who would know or remember that. And it was hugely successful. And I think Jasper Conran was the really leading person with all of that. He had an incredible eye and collection of how he built it. That was my first experience. And then gradually I did quite a lot of charity collaborations to begin with, which is a wonderful way of kind of being able to share a brand and so on. I mean, I think the thing to me is it's not just about generating more sales, which obviously is an advantage, but you share someone else's customer base, profile, all of that, which is commercially really helpful. But it often is about learning and discovering how other companies work as well. And it's a great way for us, as a small business, you can get very high profile from working with the right partner. And for established businesses who need to move on and change, it's wonderful to bring in smaller companies and up-and-coming artists and creative people for their profile. So those sort of sides of it are no-brainer. But the difficult bit can be, and you have to be really careful with contractual stuff and what boundaries you have in your contract, and really feel trusting and share. I mean, you and I, we worked out, we're going to do our project for a year and then renew it, depending how sales are and how Tori feels about it, whatever. We've set boundaries around it that are very clear. We both approve our marketing, we both approve the quality. And actually, we haven't really need to have done that because we work really closely on it. But should we have needed to, it's really important. And in the past, I've done collaborations where maybe quality wasn't what I'd hoped to represent the brand. And that's not really very helpful. So quite a lot of practical things to bear in mind, aren't there? Yeah.
I think you're right. It's things to, when you work with a big brand, you might assume that things are going to be more successful, but maybe that's not always the case. I think the thing that has to work is the common thread. Are you on the same page? Are you interested in the same thing? If you take all the nuts and bolts away, what is it that join the two brands together?
It's authenticity, isn't it? I mean, anything in retail, really, it all boils down to authenticity. If it isn't there, it's never going to last, is my view of it.
Yeah.
Do you think?
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
So valid opportunities that really resonate are incredibly exciting.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think one part of this is undeniable, that when, Cath, you started your first business, the world has changed quite enormously. Social media being, and actually the force of the internet being the one I'm really thinking about. I mean, social media must be very much on your side when you need it, but how different is this situation to the way you started your business? How did you then communicate to an audience, and how different is it to now?
It's very different, but it's not. That's not a very good answer, is it? But by that, what I mean is when I started out in the old days, I got my publicity and name through lending a lot of stuff to press. And so if they wanted to borrow a table for a prop or whatever, I made sure I was as helpful as I could be to the old school press. And in those days, people would come round and want to borrow props or borrow things. And I was always lending, always doing all of that. And I guess social media does that to a degree, but there's nothing like a relationship with people who are spreading the word out there. I mean, I'm starting now under my Joy of Print umbrella, a new brand in March, like a whole different production, and I've been working on it for 2 years, getting that set up. And there is so much prep needed now for content and creating valid content. And I'm happy to do content when I feel I'm not acting. I don't know if anyone else has had this experience. If I'm talking about something I'm generally interested in talking about. I mean, Tori and I recently did a Q&A, and we had people write in and give us questions they wanted, for us. And we had a really lovely time answering the chats and really kind of discovering things about each other within the chats. It felt like a proper conversation. But if someone asked me to stand up and say something about, I don't know what, not very much. I'm not a very good actress. I can't do it. I'm completely stuck. But if we're discussing like how we created the weaves, why we do things, then it's great, isn't it? I don't know, maybe you guys have a lot of experience of all of this promoting your businesses, but it is hard if you're not an actress to do all of that.
I think if you found the thing you enjoy, it's not the joy is inside you,
Yeah.
and you know what you're talking about. The confidence might come at a later stage, but if you find the thing and it's there inside you, you almost can't help for it to pour out and want to tell people about it. And I think that can be where people resonate with it.
I agree, and I think the other thing I discovered is I personally don't like having my photograph taken, and it was the bane of my life when I was going through all my business thing. I was like, I can't bear this, And I've realized that actually I don't mind doing filming because you're chatting. Like here, I don't mind. I'm really happy chatting to everybody. But it's that thing when you have to pose. It's like, horrible.
I think
so anyway, if anyone else has found that, good tip. After all these years in retail, I've discovered chat is fine, still photography, not so fine.
I think I heard that the Reels workshop this morning between Kirsty and Andy was very popular because, of course, Reels are very popular and it's good to know how to do them. But I love the fact that we're moving away, it seems, from having to do the dancing and the choreographed sort of crazy transitions to actually sitting in front of the camera and talking, because it is the relevance of your message which resonates. It's the bit sort of thing, actually, I would love to have a kitchen like Tori's and perhaps I need to buy her products to make it so. I wanted to ask, well, yes, actually, so with social media, which is something that sort of everyone needs to think about, how do you ensure when you've got a very strong, independent individual voices, how do you bring that together when it comes to a collaboration?
I think for us, it wasn't an enormous departure from what was already there. And I think maybe that made it sort of a natural progression. So there wasn't something new to make up. It was an extension of certainly what we were already doing, and it naturally sort of came in, and it sort of flowed with what was there.
We did the photography and that kind of side of things together, and we planned the visual kind of pages of what we were going to do. I have to say, Tori is much more savvy and knows a lot more about social content than me. So one of the good things about the collaboration is I've been learning so much from her as I go along about how things have changed. But it has been a very easy journey there, hasn't it? Well, thanks to you with all your knowledge, because I'm really patchy about how I do it.
Well, it's amazing. I mean, if I go back to the beginning of the business, it was as Instagram was happening, and I don't know whether it's good or bad, but the history of my business is documented literally from the first drawing, the first sample, 30-centimetre sample of Tori Murphy fabric that ever existed. The whole thing has been documented. And I don't know, it's been an enormous tool in my business. And I'm sure without it, there would have been other ways. And, you know, you find your groove, but what we do is visual. And there wasn't necessarily a tool out there in the past that allowed you to tell your story through pictures.
It was through traditional marketing, really. It's how, I used to make catalogues. And now imagine trying to post a catalogue, you know. I mean, people, obviously, catalogues are still going, but running a business only on catalogues now doesn't think about it. You can't, it's crazy, isn't it?
I'd actually say that probably Instagram makes collaborating so much more easy, because if you have a shop and then you want to collaborate with someone, it's really, the collaboration exists within your shop and there's a sort of dominating partner, whereas I sort of feel that you can come together a bit more easily like this. But I know there is sort of a big elephant in the room this year in retail, which of course is sort of the economic strife out there, and I know that it's going to be coming up in lots of these workshops and probably has done. I suppose my question to you both would be, you must have seen a lot over the years that you've been trading. How does the retail industry get through these big hiccups? Because it always does come through it, just like the property market, but when you're in it, it never feels like it will end. What have you seen in the past that sort of give you confidence and could give others confidence in that we will get over it and good times will come again?
I mean, the hardest trick with retail is to have newness, isn't it? You have to reinvent, and you have to change, and you have to have new, but you have to keep your brand integrity. And that's the magic trick, which is so difficult. And I think if you stay too static, it's very hard. If you get a very big bestseller, it's really hard to not rely on, it's very tempting to just rely on that and keep it in as the main thing. And it's so important that one doesn't do that and that you begin to kind of introduce other things, try other things. Because otherwise, that big bestseller will gradually go like that. It has to happen. And it's not that you have to take it off the shelf, but what you make dominant, how you play with those things, that's the trick of retail. And I think the thing that drives that is a love of design, a love of what you do, and a passion for what it is, and a curiosity. Because if you keep curious and you're always wanting to design and develop, then it shows in the business, doesn't it? And it's particularly difficult when times are tough to take risk. But unfortunately, it's almost the time when you have to do it. I mean, it obviously costed risk, but it's thinking about how do you keep your customers' interest. That's the most difficult thing, and it's not just doing discounts and markdowns and this and that to help people out. It's about giving them a very personal service, perhaps. I mean, I know now so much stuff is automated that I'm really gone back to going into retail stores and totally dependent on the customer service and the way that's approached. And online, actually, customer service as well. It doesn't matter where it is. But that personal feeling of and a communication. You know, we all went through all that weird time in lockdown, but obviously online sales shot up in some ways, and it's how does one come back down and pan all of that out. But really, really good, well thought through communication and customer service, I think, does a lot to help at the moment, don't you think?
Definitely, the sort of, it's the entire picture from the moment somebody sees the product. They may come back a few times. They then think, okay, right, I'm ready to purchase. But that isn't the end of our service. It's sort of the beginning, because you're about to hand over something and you want that delivery to be an extension of all the thought and the effort that has gone into the product. You would hope that that goes into the delivery of the goods as well, so that when the person receives it, when it's up in their home for the next 30 years, that they're going to enjoy that. So it's the bigger picture. It's not just about that instant thing. It's how can you make the whole experience a joy.
But I really noticed, like I bought 2 prints the other day after Christmas in a sale from this studio where it's a very small business and they sell different artists' work. And the girl who runs it was so sweet. She messaged me and said, I'm sorry, I haven't been in over Christmas and I can send you the prints. Would you like them together? Do you need them in a hurry? Or can I send one and the other or whatever? But just that way of thinking about things. And you don't mind if something hasn't turned up, if someone gives you a proper reason why it is. It's that sort of way that, and shops that ring you if something's come back in stock or whatever it is. It's this personal thing we're missing a lot, which actually I think is much harder with big businesses. Really hard for them to do big customer service.
I think there's also, you touched on it, but following up with customers, again, so people can express interest, but they can often go away. But I think if there's a human touch to reach out and say, you know, thank you for visiting, can we help? Is there anything that we can do? I think there's a big sort of part of the business that you can translate just by communications.
It's so hard though, isn't it, now when we get tracked so much? You know that thing when you're sitting in your kitchen talking about, I don't know, tomatoes or something, and then you get a thing on your phone saying, do you need to buy tomatoes from so-and-so? And you're like, I've been tracked again.
That aside,
that aside.
If there are people here today or will be watching this later, are thinking about collaborating, taking that sort of next PR step with their business, hoping to cross-pollinate with other followers and shoppers, what would be your tips? You touched on values before and how important it is to have similar values. Values, and what else would you suggest?
I've always loved learning about other forms of manufacturing. You know, like I hadn't known about the weave and this thing where, you know, we were talking about working with cotton or linens or this or that, all the technical stuff that you learn. But also other people's businesses have so many talents that, you know, I've learned from Tori about her marketing, I've learned about her weaving. I don't know, she'd tell you what, if anything, she's learned from me. But I think this thing of just always learning, isn't it? It's learning and also being able to be supportive. And it's very nice. It's quite lonely sometimes running a small business. And it's really nice to share experiences with other people. And it just is encouraging and positive. And I couldn't fault it. I definitely think the catch is in choosing the right partners and choosing the partners for the right reason and then trusting them. And that makes the huge difference. Otherwise, it can be quite challenging.
I think there's a few things that you can sort of measure collaboration, measure the successes, the financials, there's sort of the reach of the collaboration, you know, how many people see it, sort of then how successful it is for the brand itself, you know, how hopefully it's sort of taken it up another level. But then I think, and it's the same point really, but it's how do you personally feel about it? Can you wake up in the morning and think, this sits right with me? What I'm working with, I'm really proud of. Someone else might not like it, but if you sort of chop it down the middle, I'm proud of it. And I think there's enormous personal success, certainly in our collaboration. I'm very proud of it. It's a good product, and as a designer, that means a lot.
No, vice versa, I just have to say.
Often they say to sort of work out whether you're doing the right thing and sort of shop your own website. Would you have the products in your own home? And the answer sounds like it's a yes. I wonder whether, have you said all you would like to say? I would wonder whether we could open it up to some questions. Some questions might have Abigail. Would anyone like to ask any questions of these two fantastic ladies? And if not, we can come up with our own.
Don't be shy.
I'd love to know if there's anyone out there doing collaborations.
There is one here.
Yeah.
There's one.
Hello. I wanted to ask what projects you have on the horizon and if you would move your kitchen collaboration into other departments of the house.
Good question.
So yes, is the answer. So we started here with a capsule collection of, I think there was 3 cushions and 2 throws. And then that led on to kitchen textiles, and then kitchen textiles led on to accessories led on to fabric. And as demand for fabric grew, last year we launched made-to-measure curtains and blinds, and it's a big area now for us, even in the short space of sort of 4 or 5 months that we've been going. It's a very different business, and it's an exciting stage. But it wouldn't have happened hadn't we have done the groundwork for the last 10 years. I don't think it's something that you can just necessarily switch on. It was an organic extension of something that was moving.
Thank you.
Might you also expand your collaboration to other parts of the home?
We've gone to the made-to-measure curtains and fabric, haven't we? Well, you've got your curtains going, but the fabrics, yeah.
So it was the kitchen collection is there now, but this January our fabric is available now by the meter.
Any other questions? Maybe. Oh, yeah, we've got a couple.
I just wondered how important you think it is to have product manufactured in the UK for consumers today.
I think definitely it is, where possible. I think now we have to. I used to in the past have really difficult challenges about that, because when my business grew, we couldn't manage the manufacturing in the UK, and the only way I could look at it in those days was we wouldn't be able to employ so many people if we didn't move the manufacturing. But having the privilege of starting again, I'm doing the new brand I'm doing in the spring, which sounds strange, but it's a very personal thing to do with body care and so on. Everything is manufactured here in the UK, and as sustainably as possible. Because if you open a new book, we've got a chance to do things in a more productive way, and I think and responsibility that's there, we have to. I can't hear. Yes, totally. I mean, in every level. And also trying to keep things very focused, and whatever's in the range, what is necessary and not necessarily, but not making something big, not making something that has to be changed the whole time, trying to keep things that have a sort of continuity, but how do you create newness and interest in that? That's the thing I find really fascinating. So, for example, we've been designing bottles for ages, and you don't need to come out with a new bottle next week. You come out with refills and, all of that kind of thing. And the market is so exciting at the moment with all the kind of materials that are coming through, what we're able to use, how we can do things. And also much more sort of supply and demand rather than sitting on stock. With all the wastage that happens with so much sitting there, and it's like landfill. So the combination of how manufacturing is changing so fast in that positive way, and obviously less of the kind of travel involved and all of that thing, and buying locally is really exciting, along with the kind of responsibility of how one uses social media. It's a wonderful time, but very, very challenging. And I think responsibility is quite an important word in all of that of how does one try.
But I think with the Made in England, if I look at sort of the history of our business, the manufacturing is the business. The Made in England is the business. And I think if you're prepared to look and sort of delve and have a bit of a battle, because you'll have as many doors shut in your face as they will open. But if you're not prepared to sort of get knocked down when those doors do close, there is so much exciting stuff being made in this country. You don't need to go overseas. And actually, there's a false economy sometimes that you may think could be cheaper to get made elsewhere. But then you have to think about production problems. Can you see the product? Communication problems. There's a lot happening in England and in the UK at the minute. And I think if you're prepared to look for it, you can find it.
I have to say, I think there's some things it is difficult to make certain things here. There are things. But if you do make abroad, there's ways of being responsible about it. And actually, it's almost more expensive you have to do the research and get everything signed off thoroughly in order to know where and how things. You have to visit where you're getting things made. And that costs a fortune. But you have to do it to be able to say you're responsibly having things made in the right way, having all the tests passed and all of that kind of thing. But definitely, I think there's so much new manufacturing appearing here and a lot of problem solving, which is really wonderful. And there used to be such an attitude about how can we actually take this opportunity and make something of it, you know. There's a lot of really positive thinking happening and really good constructive dialogue going on for new.
I think we've sort of gone through a big phase of there being lots and lots of shortcuts open to everyone, that we sort of sometimes maybe stop and don't look for them. And, don't look for the things which were always there or have been building around them. And shortcuts certainly are not always the most cost-effective and not the best sustainable journey stories either. In any case, any more questions?
Hello. My mum runs a small business and she does lots of her own artwork that she's currently starting to put into printing and put into fabrics and stuff. She's talked to a few different companies, and the bigger companies you go, usually, like you say, you can't go in and talk to them and kind of feel all the products out. So kind of what we're at the moment is she's got some products made, but it's that next step of like introducing those products to companies to sell for her, because the bigger the company, the bigger the order is, and then the money that she's putting out to get them printed in the first place is going up. And it's kind of like, how do you figure out whether or not it's worth putting all that money in to get all those products before you get the orders in from other companies? And it's just kind of like how to figure out what the right pathway to go is, whether it's a smaller company that does smaller batches that's more money, but you know them and you can go, or bigger companies where you can't kind of get that like one-on-one collaboration, like you're saying, where you can talk to them and understand the process of it all. Just any advice in that kind of sense of like sort of putting them both together as such?
I mean, just from my point of view, when I started really small to test things. And nowadays, it's easier to do sampling and get batches and small trials made than it used to be. There's digital printing, there's all kinds of ways that didn't exist. And so it depends on risk in a way. I mean, obviously, there's more profit to be made by, as you say, doing these bigger batches, but testing the market and making sure that often things have to adapt and develop. My preference would be to start small and find out what the reaction is, than sit on a lot of stock without knowing. Wouldn't you?
Yeah, definitely. And there's also things to be aware that, retailers can change their mind at the last minute. Yeah. And you could end up with sort of a bedroom full of whatever it might be, but be careful and go steady. I don't know, I think buyers now are maybe a bit more flexible as well. I think they're open. I don't know. It's go steady, but have confidence in opening a dialogue, because it's not always what you think it might be.
They always like seeing new things, don't they? Seeing anyway.
This may come across as a really naive question, but in the initial stages of your collaboration, were you sitting opposite, across each other on the kitchen table, drawing and designing together?
Did we?
Yeah.
Well, Cath very kindly came up to see me and our factory in Nottingham. And when we started working together, we were in lockdown, I think, so we started initially by Zoom.
We were doing Zoom calls, and then I have a studio. I've got a team of 4 in my studio designing print. So Tori and I discussed the kind of options and what we might achieve. And then we did lots of mock-ups of how the prints might work out, scales, bits, this and that. And we went to and fro until, I don't think we met before we did the first samples. We talked a lot, because it was Zoom days. I mean, it still is a bit Zoom days, isn't it? But we talked, and then once the sampling happened, I went to visit Tori. And that's when I knew I really wanted to do the collaboration, because her setup so reminded me of my business as it was growing. The lady who used to help me up in Scotland in her workroom, the 2 ladies in the back of your office, this whole thing, it just actually made me feel so nostalgic for when you have a kind of connection with the people who are making all the product. Incredible. So at that stage, and then we were going to and fro with our yarns and colours and bits, weren't we? Yeah.
And I think it is, I was having a conversation with somebody else earlier, you can have telephone calls, you can have emails, you can have text messages, but I think it's when you come together in person, that's when things start to happen. So when we came together, it was great.
Thank you. Hello.
Thanks. I loved hearing the origin story of On the Floor in Italy, and for the success of the global business in Asia, there was a lot of influences, I imagine, that made you appreciate home and handmade in England. I guess having those experiences, how do they influence you now, and how do you incorporate them? I guess it adds to the newness that you talk about.
So it's not often until you look back that you understand why you are where you are. I think being on the factory floor in Italy, I was away from home. And if I look back in my career, a lot of it is boiled down to home and the importance of home and how you feel when you're away from home. And my business is about making home comfortable. And I think one of the reasons I was so excited to work with Cath and Joy of Print was, I think ultimately we're material girls. We're sort of, it's fabric, it's pattern, it's print, but the bigger picture is home and the importance of it. And I think that is always in my mind. It's home, making home happy, making home comfortable. And therefore, I think there's always newness available because home changes. We change. I was single when I started the business. I'm now a mother, and you sort of have to, the business ebbs and flows, I think, with you. So therefore, there's newness as you organically grow, I think.
I think for me, my business began as a really very English business, my old Cath Kidston business. And then for certain, the strongest influence on me and all of that has been working a lot with Japan and my Japanese friends, Japanese retailers, partners, all the rest of it. And this extraordinary sense of quality, attention to detail, immaculate kind of thinking behind things, and the standards that they convey there. And so now, when I started my new studio, it's been a sort of religion almost that everything is finished to the highest exacting standards we can do. And before something goes out, you feel so proud of it if you make that extra thing. And it's a privilege to be able to do that when I'm kind of running the timetable. I'm not having to meet deadlines that when you have a bigger juggernaut you have to do. But like with Tori, we were able to go back and forth with the samples, change the launch date, all of that kind of thing, till we were absolutely 100% happy with what. When Tori said when you can cut things through in half and feel proud of them, it's so what I feel about working again. You know, I went back into work because I love it and I want to be really proud of what I do. And I kind of feel if you work for that reason, you have a really good chance of coming through with good things because there's such a sort of passion for what one's doing. That's been my lesson, to not have to compromise over the years, you know. That's what I've been left with. So in the studio, there's 4 girls working there. They draw on the computer with a Wacom as well as with pen and ink. But it's that feeling, everything starts with sketches. I'll do a really rough doodles, bits and pieces. Then we progress and we draw with pen and ink, all sorts of different things. But we're in such a computerized age. And it's about that sort of, there's nothing like that hand to paper, that feeling of handmade. You can see it with, you know, looking around handmade pottery, things that they may be mass manufactured, but they've been originated by hand. There's nothing like it, I think, in the field that I like working in, drawing and painting and bits. And, you know, the fragrances I've been working on with this new project, we've been taking the plants that we're reproducing. The plant has gone direct to the perfumier. He's been working from the leaves of the plant to the fragrance. The drawings are from looking at the plant to the thing. When we were doing these things, every detail, like the threads, the bits. And it doesn't have to be that time-consuming. It can be commercial, but it's about taking great care and trying to do things really authentically. I find that really fascinating. Anyway, thank you.
Well, thank you, everyone. I think we can all agree this is a collaboration of gold, and I'm sure you'll be looking it all up on your phones on the way home. Thank you so much, Cath. Thank you, Tori.
Thank you.
And thank you to all of you. Thank you.